Welcome, everyone, to Monday Afternoon Roundtable. David Munday, your host today. Got my brother Jason with me.
Hey.
How you been?
Good. How about you?
Good. Busy?
Yeah, not so much case-wise, but getting caught up on stuff.
Right.
I'm doing a lot of office paperwork, trying to make the most of the downtime, trying to get caught up.
Sending in invoices, getting paid big money.
I wish I was. Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
We got a good. We're going to go to a famous or infamous case.
Infamous
case. It's not only nationwide famous, or infamous, but North Carolina specific. It's the Jeffery McDonald murder case in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, from 1974.
Yeah, I think the murder actually occurred was 1970, or was it?
It might have been. You might. Yeah, but no, it was 1970. You're right.
The murder occurred in 1970.
Yeah, you're correct.
And just a little bit of background. Yeah, I did some contract work for Fort Bragg, the provost marshal's office here several years ago, and they took me by the actual apartment duplex where the murder occurred, and it's just like it was back in 1970. Still sealed up. They may have torn it down since then, Jason, but I don't think so, because the case is still, the appeals are still going on.
Yeah.
And Jeffery R. McDonald's still in prison.
Yeah, and they said it's one of the most, I got a term. High profile, and went through the system so much. Litigated cases, is that the terminology you want to use?
Right.
It's been appealed, all kinds of things. It's a very interesting case. My only familiarity with it prior to yesterday doing research was just from when I was a kid. Remember seeing it on TV, and I was telling you earlier, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and he was on the news all the time, and I thought, this guy's a creep. I mean, I knew but there's a lot of stuff to this case.
You're right, and there was an Article 32 hearing, which is a military term for a court proceeding, and they kind of pretty much dismissed it.
Yeah, he was found acquitted, basically.
And Jeffery McDonald, after the murder, let's talk a little bit about the murders themselves. It was Jeffery McDonald's wife, Colette, and then his 2 daughters.
And Colette was pregnant at the time.
Several months pregnant, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then the daughters, age...
They were young.
Yeah, 2 and
maybe 6,
something like that. Yeah, I think. No, Kimberly was 5 and Christy was 2. I'm sorry, to be corrected. And Jeffery McDonald was raised in a working class family, but he was very popular in school and high school, most popular.
President
of his class, all these superlatives that he won when he was in high school. Went on to got a degree or a scholarship at Princeton, Ivy League school, and then went on to Northwestern University in Chicago to get his medical degree. And then from there, was dating Colette in high school, and she became pregnant, and so they were married. Then he decided he wanted to be in the Army, United States Army. He wanted to be a paratrooper, I think was his dream. So he joined the Army, got assigned to Fort Bragg.
As the doctor for the 82nd Airborne.
Well, he was with the U.S. Army, the Airborne Division there at Fort Bragg, but under the Green Beret. He was the medic for the Green Berets at that time, which Vietnam was going on and a lot of things were happening during that time frame. Well, he was popular at Fort Bragg as well, as you can imagine, being the medical doctor for the Green Beret team. So he and Colette lived in government housing there on base. Have you ever been to Fort Bragg?
No, but I have. I've been I haven't been on the base, but I've been by it.
Okay. On base is just like another city within a city.
Yeah.
They have their own rules, regulations, their own police, everything kind of controlled by the military. So.
And it said his apartment was a apartment complex specifically for officers that were married.
Correct.
Family. Correct. And officer rank.
But it was no more than a duplex apartment.
Exactly.
Just what you see around here. They moved to the apartment, and Jeffery McDonald, again, popular. According to some of the reports that I in doing the research, one article said that he had at a minimum at one time close to 18 different relationships with other women.
Yeah, he was a
womanizer.
Yeah.
He was the stud there at Fort Bragg, is what it looked like. So he was popular. He worked off-site from the military, worked at an emergency room near Fort Bragg. I don't know if it was in Cumberland County or the adjoining county, but he worked at an emergency room, third shift, to make extra money. And the way I understand it, there was a little bit of money issues within the family based on my research. Were you able to see any of that?
That, and also that he utilized prescription amphetamine.
Right. Yeah. To stay awake.
Well,
Speed,
he was his job and his extra curricular activities.
He's busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That many girlfriends, man. He's got to have something to help him. But being who he was intelligent, well-spoken, educated, high-ranking individual within the military from the medical standpoint, up-and-coming career, if you will. And then on that night, 1970, something went wrong. Something went terribly wrong in that household. There's one book. Joe McGinnis is the author, called Fatal Vision, and many of our listeners may have read the book. I've got it in my office somewhere.
And they made it into a TV miniseries.
They did. And so it tells a lot about the story. Long story short, Joe McGinnis, the author that he was, Jeffery McDonald hired him to write his autobiography, to write the book.
Give him his side of what happened.
And gave him a retainer up front, if I'm not mistaken. So Joe McGinnis was writing the book, and about halfway through, he decides, Jeffery McDonald, you're guilty. I don't care what you say. All the evidence is overwhelming against you in this case. You're guilty of killing your wife and 2 children and your unborn child. And so there was a big controversy there. So long story short, it was Jeffery McDonald's stepdad who was pretty much the person behind pushing this case, because military dropped it.
Yeah, at first he was behind McDonald. Like he
was.
supported him, and then
Extremely
stuff started coming out.
Right. The Joe McGinnis story started coming out, talking about what the evidence was overwhelming that was being presented. So then Colette's stepdad, he pretty much got behind and said something's got to be done, because he's moved off to California at this time. The case has gone unsolved. That was 4 crazed hippies broke into his house one night. Drug crazed, I think, was the word that he used, and broke into his house.
Yeah.
The stabbing was brutal.
Oh yeah.
There were ice picks used, kitchen knives, blunt objects to the head. These are small, 2 little girls and his wife and unborn child.
The wife and the 2 children suffered a brutal death from the bludgeoning and the stab wounds, fractures to the face, head. They all 3 had severe defensive wounds where they fought back.
Right, or tried to.
Jeffery McDonald had minimal wounds. No wound required extensive medical treatment. He had 1 stab wound that was 5/8 of an inch deep, had 0.
And remember now, he's a surgeon, so he knows where to stab and not cause a whole lot of damage.
Had 0 defensive wounds. Going back to when he moved to California after the military decided not to press charges, got a job as a doctor out there and began dating a 22-year-old, making good money. He became a local celebrity. He used it as basically saying, I was wrongfully accused, and tried to make a name off of that.
And he did.
Yeah,
he did. And I relate this case, and you remember it because we talked about it on the podcast. The Wetzel case, the Frank Wetzel murder case, where he killed the 2 state troopers in one night. Frank Wetzel and Jeffery McDonald are 2 people in one. You look at them; they have the same. They're high IQ, smart, intelligence. Con men is what
narcissistic,
they are.
sociopathic.
Bingo. And you can put both of them side by side and they even look alike.
Yeah.
But Jeffery McDonald, they convened a grand jury, and the grand jury come back with a true bill for the death of the 2 children and the wife. And so he had to stand trial in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I think that was 1974, the trial.
No, I think the trial was 79.
Okay.
I don't know.
We'd have to check our facts. Okay. All
right. He was convicted in August of 79.
All right.
I don't know, but I think they did the grand jury years earlier.
Okay. I'll stand to be corrected. The grand jury convened in April of 1974. That's where they come back with a true bill. And then he was convicted to life in prison in 1979. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so then he served. He went. But let's back up. When he was in California, he bought a yacht.
Yeah.
Lived there in was it Santa Monica where he lived, somewhere in California. But he was living the fast life, fat cat life in California. Police officers loved him. He bought the entire police department bulletproof vest because that's when they first come out.
He played the game.
He did, and he was good at it. So he was just a front man. He was reviewed on 60 Minutes. All the networks kind of picked his story up because of his high profile. But then they decided when the grand jury come back, he went to trial. And the jury and the book really, and I'm pushing this book, Joe McGinnis' book, Fatal Vision, because it kind of goes in depth with the trial. And that's where the interesting part of it, because all this lady that come in to confess that she was one of the crazed hippies with the floppy hat, remember?
And she never wore that hat after that.
Right. And they wrote blood or something. Pigs on the wall in blood.
Copying the Manson
Manson murders. And supposedly there was a magazine in the house that was portraying the murders, in the Manson murders. So that they think that was where he got the idea from. And one of his friends even come to court and testified, yeah, we were talking about that a couple of days ago prior to the deaths. And
he based the theory or the story of the 1 female, 3 male hippie drug cult. Yeah. He based it on real people that were local to that Fayetteville, to that community. And they were known. I mean, they were known drug abusers, secondhand criminals, just your typical drug-induced criminal.
Freddie Carcel was her stepfather's name, the one that kind of got behind it and pushed it. Had he not done that, I think this case would have been never heard in court.
He was so adamant about it. He did a recording that he wanted to be played every time McDonald went up for parole because he knew he was getting older in life and he ended up dying. And he wanted it played every time he had a parole. It was just basically saying that he wished he'd never get out of prison and that he felt he was guilty and he took the family away from him and, the daughter and grandkids. And
if I'm not mistaken, he was eligible for parole in 1990.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
But he's never admitted his guilt. And to get the parole, he's got to admit guilt. And he's saying, I didn't kill anyone. And Frank Wetzel did pretty much the same thing. Of course, he was never eligible for parole because we can't make sure the parole board was familiar with that case every time, just like Mr. Freddy's doing.
Yeah.
He's making sure this case stays alive, and hopefully Jeffrey McDonald will never be released from prison. But the fact that these, like you were saying, all the people that were involved in this case have since died.
Yeah, and the state's case, I believe he's guilty.
He's guilty as the day is long.
But their case, they could have done a lot better job. For instance, it's a lot of turmoil in this case. The state prosecutor in this case, ended up being charged and convicted for embezzlement at the DA's office in 1990.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they did an appeal on that based on that,
Right.
There was some testimony of a U.S. Marshal about the female supposed suspects admitting guilt.
She admitted, then she denied, then she admitted.
And then the mothers, and all these people are all dead now. Everybody is dead except for Jeffrey McDonald. So
the interrogation part of it was interesting because the Army investigators originally conducted the investigation. They'd probably never been to a murder scene. Most of them hadn't. And so here they have a triple murder on their hands, and the suspect right there in the home, and with all kind of allegations of crazed hippies on base. One, it's going to be pretty damn difficult to get on Fort Bragg without a pass. But anyhow, so the trial itself, the interrogation itself, I think was shoddy from the get-go. Then the State Bureau of Investigation was called in to help, and
then the FBI,
because it was on federal property, probably come in as well. But McDonald was saying that one of the hippies pulled his T-shirt over his head, so he couldn't fight. He couldn't fight back. He was useless. He was just defenseless, and he went unconscious.
Yeah, and he said the reason they attacked him specifically and his family was because he would not give out medication to people. I guess at his part-time job,
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that he wouldn't give them medicine or prescription pills that they wanted, and they targeted him specifically.
And it's funny that we're talking about amphetamines and things of that nature from 1970, which was more of a West Coast drug we're talking about, and he was working the East Coast, but the military had access to all these things because of what was going on worldwide at that time. He's still in prison, so that's a
he
good
remarried.
thing. Of course he did.
He's a ladies' man. He's going.
Yeah, and she's the one pushing to get him out. But once again, and all the stories, and the stories are going to get even better because all the deaths involved of all the people that were truly behind the case, that know the facts of the case, they're gone. So he's going to embellish. He's going to lie. He's going to make up what he wants to, and he's a con man.
It would be great to see that case file, to go through the crime scene,
and I asked to see that when I was there working with the provost marshal. I said I'd love to see that file, and he said no. There's two places I couldn't go. I couldn't see anything dealing with the Jeffery McDonald case, and I couldn't go on to the Special Forces section because it was off limits. They couldn't go on there.
Yeah.
So it was just because it happened in North Carolina and all the history behind it. But what drew my attention to it was because of the Jeffrey McDonald and Frank Wetzel connection. Not necessarily the time frame, because it was a big time. Wetzel he killed the troopers in '57. This occurred in 1970, but they were the same people.
Same suspect profile.
Thank you. Yeah.
And with him being Special Forces trained, even though he's a medical doctor, he still had to go through jump school, Special Forces school. He's a soldier, a high caliber Tier 1 soldier. Not saying he was a super badass, but
I think in his mind he thought he was, and he probably was.
But if somebody was breaking into your house and killing your pregnant wife and 2 children, you're going to put up a better fight, especially against 3 hippies and a female. I mean, I'm not saying that's not slamming on hippies, but he's got much more training.
One would think.
I mean, I'm not saying he would have not got injured or they wouldn't have died, but he would have put up a hell of a lot better fight.
There's a lot of the book goes into this. The smallest daughter one of the daughters had a bedwetting issue
that night,
and supposedly he come in from working the late shift, was going to go to bed, and the wife had the small child in bed with them in their bed in the master bedroom. Only 2 bedrooms in the house. But the youngest one was in bed with him. She wet the bed. So he comes in. He gets pissed from what the book talks about. And he jerks the sheet off and flips the mattress over and does all this stuff. And the prosecutors used that as possibly what sparked his anger management issues, the drug issues, the amphetamines that he was probably taking. I don't know if they did any forensic tests on him or not. I can't remember.
And they also even brought up the point that he was working in a lot of hours, like he wouldn't sleep regularly.
No.
They said that could have added to the psychotic episode.
Possibly. And he could maybe not remember portions of it because he was in that fatigue state that he was in and medically induced drug with amphetamines or whatever he was taking. So it's just sad that a man of his caliber, that what he could have been and what he is. He's a cold-blooded killer, is what Jeffrey R. McDonald
and reading the description of the death of the pregnant wife and the 2 children is heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking, and we've seen gruesome stuff before, and I didn't see any. Just reading it, the description of it was horrible.
Oh, I know.
Absolutely horrible.
And we didn't go into that for a reason.
Yeah.
And it was just multiple times that they were stabbed and beat, and it was tragic, and it should have never happened. He has to live with that every day. But in his mind, he didn't do it.
They said the supervisor, the sergeant of the MPs that arrived on the scene, the senior guy, was the one that made the initial entry and said it panicked him, rightfully, as it would anybody.
Sure would.
It was that he come out just like, oh my gosh, this is awful.
And we got to remember this is 1970, pre-911. They probably called direct to the dispatch station there on base. The provost marshal, the MPs responded. Of course, this is Vietnam time. A lot of people were deployed. I don't know what the capacity at the base was or the population at the base was at that time. But when I was there working, they were still in the old police headquarters. They now have since moved into it. They moved while I was there, but it was still the old timey, the old cells still in the police department. And the provost marshal pretty much ran the show there. That was the chief of police, basically, on site, which was a colonel. But Jeffery McDonald case was something it's always going to be with us here in North Carolina, and most people that are from here, and at least from the baby boom era, and you remember it as a child listening to it on TV. It was
the time frame was before cable TV. I remember we had the 3 channels, and it was on TV all the time, and it was constant. I mean, it would pop on the news. You'd watch, and I just remember thinking, this guy, even as a little kid, I could tell this guy was a creep.
Yeah,
he just come across as a creep. He give you that. It's like, and I didn't know any better, but I thought, this guy, I believe what they're saying about him. As a kid,
and I'm sure he probably works out 3 times a day and probably eats everything that you're supposed to, and doesn't live like we do sometimes in the diet and the.
He'll probably live to be. He'll probably live to be 100.
Outlive us.
Yeah,
and good. I hope but this man's guilty. There's not a doubt in my mind. And I've looked at a lot of cases. You've looked at a lot of cases, but the evidence was overwhelming. It was just he should spend the rest of his life in prison.
I don't think the state got it exactly right, but they got it right. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And they did the best they could, probably. But I think they were intimidated. I think that when you have enlisted men go to a commissioned officer's residence on base, that takes everything down a notch. But when you go in and you find a crime scene like these guys found, it probably shook their world.
Yeah.
And then there's the colonel's in there. He's saying all this. Obviously, they believed him because he wasn't charged through the Article 32.
And I don't know this, but I'm speculating from what I've read. It kind of was like, all right, he's not guilty. Let's get rid of this. Let's make it like it never happened.
Makes it easy on the military. Makes it easy on the base. Makes it easy on everybody. I don't think. Hopefully that didn't happen.
I don't think they did it purposely.
But the book talks about that as well, Jason. So I highly recommend reading that. And to our viewers, it's Joe McGinnis, Fatal Vision, excellent book. It's an old book's been out there forever. So and he's written a lot of.
I'm gonna have to check it. And like I said, I wasn't real familiar with this case other than what I remembered as a kid. I did not know all the details till yesterday.
Right.
Till you brought it up, and I said, well, I'm gonna do some digging on this. And
well, it's been a fun episode.
Yeah.
Brother Tim's under the weather, so he's working behind the scenes.
Yeah. He might do the last call, maybe get some medicinal.
Help that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, once again, it's good to have everybody with us. Hope you join us next time. It's Blue Line Advantage and Spartan Investigations and 10-Star Investigations.
Yeah.
Monday Row Investigations.
We're all a bit of everything, don't we?
Monday Afternoon Roundtable. Thanks again for joining us. Look forward to talking to you next time. Hold on. We'll be back. Last call. Thanks.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. Monday Afternoon Roundtable, last call. Got Mark and Jason with me.
Mm-hmm. Tim's still doing the directing or the producing since he's still under the weather.
Yeah, he's coughed up 3 lungs today already.
Has he?
Yeah.
Got my favorite, Crown Royal, but this is Crown Royal Peach. Have you had it? Either one of them?
I've never had the peach.
Not.
It's one of those. Mark and I talking about it. It's kind of on the shelves and then it's gone. It's just a good summer drink. A lot of people like it during the summer. A little bit about it. It's the Crown Peach. To create the extraordinary blend, Crown Royal whiskeys are carefully selected by our master blender and infused with the juicy flavor of fresh Georgia peaches.
The juicy flavor.
Yeah, we love Georgia peaches. Once picked, the peaches are destoned. Never heard of that, destoned. Pressed and strained to preserve their bright aromatic flavors. The harmonious notes of the summer fruit complement the smoothness of the Crown Royal blended whiskey, mixed with iced tea for a refreshing tasting cocktail. I've never done that with iced tea, but that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But this is one that I highly recommend. It's priced reasonable. It's within our budget for sure.
I'm going to do a disclaimer. I usually don't care for peaches, so we'll just see how this shakes out.
I promise you, you'll like this.
You ain't steered me wrong yet.
It's one of my favorites.
That's the end of that.
Yeah,
we're not going to have seconds on that
No,
one.
no seconds today. Of course, we had a good episode today, talking about the Jeffery McDonald murder cases in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in
Yeah.
1970. So that was a good one. So I highly recommend everybody tuning into that one. Good thing about this one's got the little peach bag.
Yeah.
Pretty nice.
Those bags come in handy too.
So golf tees, coins. I'm not gonna tell you what all.
Ammunition.
Ammunition, spare anything.
Anything, yeah.
Goes right there. So
It's a great size for cameras too. Small cameras, video cameras.
Tasha and I used the half-gallon size ones in the camper to put around our bottles to keep them rattling together when we're traveling on the road. They work good. We ain't broke one yet.
Yeah.
I was getting on an airplane one time in Texas, and the pilot, I saw him coming out. I was waiting to go in. He probably, I'm not exaggerating, probably 350, close to big man, big old gut hanging out. And it was one of those, not a jumbo jet, but a regional jet.
Yeah.
He had his ear equipment in a Crown Royal purple bag. And I just walked, I cut him, and I said, I know I'm going to enjoy this flight. He laughed. He said, that's all I drink. He said, that's what I carry all my stuff in. He said, I got so many of these bags. I just stick them in there.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny.
Yeah, people think he's got a real, and he's going to be drinking in there.
Yeah, it was a smooth flight, too. Thank goodness. Anyhow,
That Crown Royal helped.
yeah. Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers, guys.
Oh my, you can taste that peach.
Man, that's good.
I told you, it's
That's
good.
good. I
It's
don't
just
like
a
peaches, but it's good.
Good summertime, refreshing drink. They say mix it with iced tea to make a good cocktail if you want to weaken it a little bit.
I think that would be very good.
Yeah.
It's a little sweet though.
Yeah, it is sweet.
So,
I like the apple. I mix the apple with cranberry juice and a touch of Sprite, and it makes a good drink. Good summer drink.
so
I think this would be good with unsweet tea. Put the
Sure, put the
unsweet
sweet, yeah, the
because
sweet- the
it's
sweet gets
this
sweet
is
out of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
what grade do you give it, Mark? 1 to 10.
I'm gonna give it 8.5.
Okay, Jason.
I'm gonna give it a little lower just because it's too sweet.
It is
It's
sweet.
very
It's
flavorful.
sweet.
It's great. I'm gonna give it a 7. It's
Okay.
very smooth though.
Yeah,
it's just
very,
it's
yeah.
a little sweet for me.
I'm gonna give it a good solid 8. So it's a good score. Any kind of Crown Royal, you're not gonna go wrong.
Yeah.
Uh,
Everyone we've
Yeah.
everyone we've done on here has been really smooth.
Right. So, been a fun episode. Next week we'll have something coming up. But you got anything on the burner for this week?
Just getting caught up.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim and I's got a case we're in the middle of that's kind of been a challenge. So
Yeah, y'all had a good one on that one.
yeah, it's still challenging. So we're working on that.
That's what we do.
Got another meeting tonight with a new client.
Challenge is our middle name.
Yeah, no kidding.
Anyhow, thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next time, Monday
Like and share.
afternoon,
Yeah,
Roundtable.
like, share, subscribe, comment. We want to hear what you have to say.
Give us some suggestions.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, y'all.